and welcome to Dissonant Dialogues. I'm Emily, and I'm here with Claire. Claire, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I might be surviving food poisoning or
Yeah.
something. I don't know. So, my podcast energy is fabricated today, but it's a learning experience, I guess, for all the listeners of how to fabricate performance energy because
It's
ultimately that's what we have to
acting.
do. Yeah, we have to do that on stage, so there we go. But no, I'm excited to
Uh,
be here and talk about a wonderful topic today that I think is going to serve just so many musicians, and specifically musicians that are thinking about going to music school, are currently in music school, about to enter. Um, if you are a teacher yourself and you have students that are asking questions about going to music school, this is also
right.
a great way to learn some of the inside scoop of things. So, this is basically an episode about all around music school hacks. So, by all around, we're quite literally going to be going into an array of different topics, talking about different tools that we wish that we had. Specific things to live by, stuff about surviving an oral skills and music theory class, which is daunting for so many
Yes.
musicians, the music history class, dealing with procrastination, surviving professors, all of that stuff. So you're going to learn just a bunch of like little tips and tricks. So have a little notepad nearby or like in your brain and just jot down some of these tips that might be helpful for you.
Or watch more than once. Just come back and reference us.
Yeah, just keep watching.
I have a whole pile. I have props today. So
Really? Oh, okay, you
I
came
I
prepared.
am my teacher's child. He loves a gadget. And so I was like, oh, I gotta get out all my gadgets. One of the most important things is having the right tools, having the right technology in order to make it as easy as possible. A lot of professors will say that you shouldn't need to rely on these things, but the world is ever changing. And quite frankly, without a little bit of help, you will not get through the schedule, the demands, the amount of music that you have to learn. We live in a time where more and more tools, more and more technology applications are available to help us than ever before. And I think that's just extremely important to be aware of what's out there so that you're not, as everyone says, you're working smarter and not harder.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the foundation of what is taught in lessons. You know, it was for
Mhm.
violin. It's like you're not going to do the most impossible fingering that's going to ultimately make everything sound bad because it's cooler to do it that way. No, you're going to do the fingering that makes it sound good. And usually it's
Right.
the easier fingering for you or the easier bowing. You want to make things as efficient as possible. That's like one of the mottos I tell all my students. I bet if you like pulled one of my students into a room and was like, what's one of the things that Miss Emily says the most? They would say, oh, she says, make your life as easy as possible. It's already hard enough. Do the easier
Yes.
thing. So yeah,
Yes.
100%. It's very important to have a list of tools to help
Yeah.
you ultimately be successful.
I think a lot of people worry that if they rely on tools too much, that their practical skills won't be built up. And that annoys me so much because college is when your practical skills are going to be the most sharp anyway, because you are forced to practice them every day just by existing in the classroom. Also, the standards by which we measure excellence and proficiency at practical skills is so different in college from how it is in your career. Like, yes, you're going to have to sight read in auditions, and yes, you're going to have to, but you'll never have the kind of schedule that you had in school again in your professional world. And you'll never be learning a role where in the privacy of your own home you can't pull up like a MIDI file for your part. Like there's no one's going to slap you over the wrist for utilizing these tools. And at the end of the day, if you can show up and do the job, it's no one's business how you got there. So we've talked about it before. I'm anti the word crutch. Any professor who says that something that helps you is a crutch, I'm like, no, no, shh, go away.
So yeah, we kind of have a list of different tools for, I guess, different musicians, whether you're an
Yeah.
instrumentalist or a vocalist. I know for a fact for instrumentalists, the TE Tuner app is like number one. I got that so long ago that I honestly can't remember if it costed money. I think it did, but ultimately it's a tuner combined into a metronome and a drone, and they even have sessions on this stuff at like the Midwest Clinic, which is a big clinic in Chicago, and like state clinics as well. So it's a very big thing, and it's really great because it's wonderful not only for you and your own practice time, but for teaching your students. They have
Hmm.
like cool beatbox rhythms and stuff you can put on. I've seen people do some really incredible stuff with it. So ultimately, it's like something that quite literally puts a smile on your face when you're practicing, because they have like smiley metronome things that like light up when you're playing. And when you play stuff in tune, it's a happy green smiley face. And when you don't play something in tune, it's like a mad red face. So it's quite fun. But that's definitely something that I would recommend for a practice session. I think it's wonderful and investing in. Then just having some kind of like cheap random, like a tuner app, and then like a random like metronome app. Like this has everything in one that you'll need, and you learn how to use it, and it's just there. I will admit it's a little complex to learn how to use it at first. You just have to get comfortable with it, and then it's just a lifesaver.
Yeah, I just have whatever free piano app was on my phone to check pitches, but
exactly. No, that's what I did my freshman year, and it was a huge pain. And that's like something kind of learning along the way. I wish that was something we could have been told, or like, I don't know, at the beginning, having some of the teachers like in their syllabus, like not just say verbatim what they're told to say, but actually have like helpful resources in there and being like, hey, this might help you be successful. These are just extra resources that would have been very helpful.
Absolutely. In the same sort of category, my favorite app, and I have demonstrations, is App Accompanist. Now, this was not out until the very, very end of my degree. I only heard about it when we got shut down in the last few weeks for the pandemic, because everybody needed recordings of their accompaniment in order to continue with the last few lessons of the semester. And, you know, everybody was trying to get in contact with their pianist, and, you know, recording quality on an iPhone, it's not always great. And what I love about this app is it does cost a bit of money as a subscription. I would say it's well worth it. You're going to pay way more for textbooks. This is where I think it's like a $15 subscription, depending on which program. So you can get, I think they have both like a theater and a classical track. And so I just selected the classical, and it's got players. So it's just got a Carmen aria pulled up on it. And it has a very, very broad variety of music. And if you don't see something that's in your repertoire that you want, you can email them and they hire pianists to get it done. It may take a while, but at least it'll be there for the next person. You can crop it. So like if you aren't doing a recitative or something, you can crop that out. You can change the octave. You can have the melody like being played along with you, or you can take the melody off of it. So if you're still learning a piece, you can have it like plunking out your part on top of the accompaniment. You can change the tempo. I wish that I had had that the whole time, because there were so many times when I would need to spend the last 5 minutes of my lesson asking, hey, can you just, you know, for my pianist, like, can you just play this so I have a recording to practice with? If you're doing something really popular, then you can probably find it on YouTube, but you can't really, you know, if you try to adjust the tempo on YouTube, it really warps the sound. And, you know, you don't know if you'll find your right key. And this was just such a helpful tool. That was one of those things that I had for like a couple of weeks that I'm like, man, that would have made my life so much easier if I could have just done that from the beginning.
Yeah, I know, that sounds incredible, definitely. Something for particularly violinists and violists. I'm sure it's a thing for cellists and bassists in another aspect, but I would say try to have at least 2 bows. For one, if you need to have any repairs done, it's nice to have an extra bow. 2, there are way too many horror stories of bows snapping right before or during concerts. Like for my recital, I prepared for if something was going to happen to my violin or bow, there was something that was going to be done that as quickly as possible. But just in general, you have rehearsals, you're really busy. I had music students come to me throughout my time here being like, hey, do you have an extra bow? I don't have one and mine just snapped, and I would have my extra one. Also, if you can have a Baroque bow, that's very helpful when you're playing Bach. My teachers huge, just so strong about that. And one of her students was Rachel Barton Pine, which if you know is huge advocate of Bach and huge researcher in Bach. And yeah, they are very strong-minded about using the Baroque bow. And it's pretty cool to have, you know, if you're teaching students and you can show them this is what a Baroque bow looks like. But ultimately just having that extra bow, and sometimes you can have a bow that is one way better for spiccato, some off the string articulations, and then ones that are better for the legato, like connected bowings. Also having an outside bow, that's something that one of my teachers had. I can't even explain how many instruments and stuff he has, it's crazy, but he does have like those, you know, the fun colored ones that are like outdoor bows. So he uses his green bow for weddings, like outdoor weddings, which is funny. But also just because, you know, the weather and temperature, you want to be careful with your instrument. Yeah. So it's kind of smart. And if you have the money to have a separate violin for outdoor gigs and stuff and just like carrying around to rehearsals. One of my teachers also told me, like, you should have a separate violin for like performances versus like some of these rehearsals like that aren't high stakes. And I think that's maybe a little extreme for some of us, but just something to think about if you can afford it,
Yeah.
if it's something that you're interested in. Claire's going to say that you should have like multiple voices then.
Yes, absolutely. Get another throat and another abdomen. There were days when I wished. No, I was just, it was so fascinating to watch like the hairs breaking at your recital. I remember like
I was so happy that a bow hair broke. It's like, yeah.
It was so, I was watching it like flutter around, and then you got to the end of the piece and you just plucked it off, and I was like, that was fun. But it felt like an achievement. It was like, yes, I played so passionately, I snapped a hair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely something to be proud of. Yes.
What was your music like compositions? Did you have a composition software of choice when you were in school?
We were offered a few different things, but that was when I was in Counterpoint. We didn't have to use anything particular for our theory level classes. For that, we would usually just write it on paper, take a picture, and submit it. But there were such short compositions. I've used Noteflight before, but that was like a while ago when I was in like 8th grade. What was the one that Finale. Finale is one that
Finale.
I hate it so much, but I used it. So yeah, that's what I've done.
I always hear people talk about Finale and Sibelius. Those are the two that I hear the most. And I learned how to use I learned how to use Noteflight in high school, and I just find that it's more intuitive. It's more simple and it's free. I think you can only store 10 compositions at a time for free, but if you're just using it for like your theory compositions, and like once it's submitted, you can delete it. So I found that to be really, really helpful. And there were times when I would have to plug in things to create my own MIDI files because I could not that's where the apps like I had would have been very helpful to know about much earlier, because there were times when I could not find anything to help me learn my piece ever. And I had teachers who said, well, you can just sit down at a piano and plunk it out. All right. I mean, yes, but how that doesn't help maximize my time. That means I need to be in front of a piano. You're trusting that I can sight read perfectly and rhythmically the entire piece, whatever it is. Somebody suggested I learn my entire opera roll that way. And I was like, even if I have the ability, I'm going to run out of stamina real quick for that.
It's like saying, oh, your Tchaikovsky violin concerto, well, to learn it, play it on the viola. Like, how is that going to help me? It's kind of like that thing.
Exactly. Like, if I already know it well enough to play it, then am I learning it? That you're completely right. Man, I wish I had those retorts when I was sitting in some of my coachings and rehearsals, because I was just sitting there like, and part of the working smarter, not harder, is you have to maximize what practicing looks like. Not all of your practice sessions are going to be sitting down in a practice room or at your home in front of a keyboard, able to do everything with your music stand set up. Sometimes it's listening to your music on a commute. So if I can create a MIDI file that helps me learn my part while I'm on the train or in the car, honestly, those were the most helpful things to practicing for me, particularly because as a vocalist, you have to memorize everything. That's just expected. Some stuff for choir, we were able to use music, but generally you're memorizing everything. So getting it in my head was really important. And honestly, I find the best way to memorize things is listening to them while doing something else. Sometimes when you are focusing so hard and like, I'm going to actively sit here and try to memorize, then your brain sort of short circuits and gets very overwhelmed very quickly. Versus think how easy it is to learn like a new pop song that you like. You play it on repeat for a couple days, it gets stuck in your head, and then boom, you have so much of it internalized within a couple of days, and you know all the words. And why do we think that classical music is so different? You have to enjoy listening to it. Don't always make the way that you practice such a grinding, intensive task that you forget that like you can learn things by listening, and you can practice without it looking like practicing. I mean, I can't tell you how many train rides to school I was sitting there with my score and my pencil in my lap and my headphones on, and that was the fastest way that I learned.
People underestimate how much you can learn from practicing that way. Practicing does not look one way,
Mm-hmm.
although there's a lot of teachers that are constantly reinforcing that you're holding your instrument and practicing with it. But I mean, when I compare the amount of the time that I do mental practice and
Mm-hmm.
like I think sometimes they get more out of mental practice than the physical
I
grind
agree.
to it. And then you're also not risking injury as much too. So learning more, not risking injury. Again, efficiency, like we talked about at the beginning. It's not a crutch. It's a way of life.
Yes. And a warning I will give for vocalists specifically is that, we're in a difficult position because our voices, if you're in college and you're undergrad during traditional ages, your voice is still so underdeveloped. And it is really hard to practice in a traditional capacity for the amount of hours that it takes to learn everything. So learning how to mental practice, learning how to silent practice is a requirement, quite literally, because otherwise just the amount of hours that you spend singing in school in classrooms already eats up basically all that you can sing without having an overuse injury. So many days. It is so hard to find, like, spend an hour openly singing after choir rehearsals, opera rehearsals, whatever you might be in, after all of the things that you do in a given day. And it is very important to make sure that when you're mentally practicing, you are not activating your throat and your abs in quite the same way, because you can think that you're not practicing out loud, and all of the muscles that affect your voice can be activating even if you're not phonating on them. And so you can actually fatigue yourself in the same way mentally practicing as practicing out loud. So it's really hard. I remember I was in a showcase rehearsal, and while somebody else was practicing their app, I had my headphones on and I was kind of like reviewing everything, making sure that I had all the last minute corrections in my head. And I did not think that I was humming, and I had my headphones on so I couldn't hear myself. And then suddenly I see the whole room turn and look at me because I had just popped out a random higher note, just like on a hum. And I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't know that I did that just and it was in the middle of like a break in the music too. So they had just like stopped singing something. When you can't hear what you're doing, you never know what it sounds like. So I'm sure it just sounded like a chicken squawk. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
no,
So.
great advice. Yeah. For all those music theory nerds or those that cry during oral skills practice who believe that they innately have defective ears, like I did, two
My husband too.
super helpful resources. Musictheory.net, which is, I feel like, what a lot of people know about already. So there's a lot of stuff where you can practice like intervals, chords. I don't think they have the cadences on there, but they have like ear training of different types of scales, the minor scales, chromatic scales, even the different modes. There's different, so many different ways to practice on there. And then I think they do rhythmic dictations. I might be wrong about the rhythmic dictations, but there's also separate websites for rhythmic dictations too. If you just look it up, those come up. But usually it's not the rhythmic ones, it's the melodic and the harmonic dictations. And that is where Aural Skills Guru comes in. Look them up on YouTube. They're incredible. I kind of just found them on my own, and I use them sometimes for like helping my students to practice on their own. They're like, well, how do I practice my melodic dictations or my harmonic dictations? I'm like, here you go. They have the answers like in the end of the video or written in the caption, so you can just follow along. They play it as many times. You can change the speed and how they're played. And there are so many different levels of the dictations. If you want diatonic, if you want particular jumps, if you want chromaticism, starting secondary dominants where there's just one in there and then it gets harder. It's so incredible just to make sure that you can constantly practice them, because unless you're lucky and you have a music theory professor that's like, yeah, here's extra practice ones, use these to practice. It's like, how do you practice dictations? You can't. So that website is a survival mechanism for music theory and oral skills.
There's so much that I didn't know about. And frankly, professors should really be keeping up with the technology that is out there, because no one ever recommended any tools to me. And it is amazing how much more there is now than there was when I was in school. And that wasn't even that long ago. I have some apps that I've only been using now to try and, keep up my skills, because when I was in college, I was doing everything by hand. I did have one program, I think it was called Aurelia, that was helpful for practicing. It was kind of an ear training application, but it did cost money because it was basically a course that I kept on my computer. But I found that I was so fatigued by how exhausting those exercises were, that on top of, being frustrated with my own struggles in theory class. Melodic dictations, that came a lot more easily. Harmonic, I always say that I hear music horizontally. I don't hear it verbally. So it's really hard. My ear picks out notes, and it's very hard for me to put it together. And then when I do hear all the separate notes, then I have to hum out what the arpeggio of it is, and then I have to remember what that represents through all of the different inversions and everything. And it's just, my brain, there's some undiagnosed thing, I'm sure, that like certain things just never become automatic for me. And I really wish that I had had the convenience of some of these apps back then, because it is so much easier to just flip open your phone on the train than it is to, you know, sit down, to book an extra session, go into an office with a professor, assuming that you trust them, book a session with a TA, have a friend, or even just to open a program on your computer. And so the couple of apps that I have liked were, one's just called Sight Singing Pro, Earpeggio, and Ella. Ella is the one that I really like right now.
Love that one. I was going to recommend that.
Yeah. Those ones have been very, very helpful. And I just found that like, it is way easier to motivate myself. First of all, apps track streaks usually. So there's like that little bit of like that reward of like, oh, I need to keep my streaks going. And you can sit in bed right at like as you're waking up and just do it real quickly. And that is way easier than telling yourself, okay, I'm going to go into an office at this particular time and I need to schedule it, interact with a human, show up somewhere, and have them help me through this.
Mm-hmm. You're making me feel like less of a freak, because I would wake up before my 8 a.m. theory class and I would warm up my ears and I'd be like, I remember like sitting in bed and I was like, perfect fifth. Like I was just tired. The thing about Aurelia though, I believe, because I asked about this before, I believe that you have to have like, you have to create the dictations yourself, or you have to have somebody.
Oh, really?
Yourself. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that was the thing that I was looking into for one of my research projects, and I was told, well, you have to put the stuff in. Otherwise, it's like professors usually that use it will put the stuff in for their classes. So that is the tricky thing. And that's kind of why I seeked out some of these other apps, is like, okay, well, my professors are not going to create new dictations for me. They could care less about me struggling. Oh. So it's up to me now to help myself learn.
Yes.
So yeah, those are the resources.
And dictate the music that you enjoy listening to. Dictate your pop songs. If you don't already know how to play that, like whatever your vernacular music that you listen to is, obviously a lot of the music that is casual is a much more simple chord structure than what you're going to have to learn in theory classes eventually. But it does really help, you know, because they're not all 1-4-5-1. You know, there's a lot of that, but there's a lot of really interesting, you know, chord choices that are being used in some of the music that might just be in your library. I struggle with chord identification. I'm really good with intervals. I don't know why. You add a third note or a fourth note and I'm like, But I remember that I used to love the fact that certain bands have sort of intervals and chords that they go to over and over again. Like if you listen to Queen or Boston or a lot of like classic rock, they love consecutive sixths. If you listen to like Alice in Chains, I'm talking about some very specific bands, they do parallel fifths everywhere. And it was really fun that because obviously, you know, that's a no-no when you're at level 1. But it was really fun that I was like, oh, I'm picking up on these things, and I'm realizing that it does get annoying because you get to a point as a classical musician where you can't just listen to music anymore. You are kind of always analyzing it, but that's going to happen one way or another. So you might as well get some extra practice out of it.
Yeah, no, that's something I did early on. I know some people struggle with this too, is trying to determine the solfege and what key they're in. So if you know you have the key in your ear and then they play a random note, it's like, oh, I don't know, is that sol, is that la? While you're just driving in your car, and especially during Christmas time, if there's like Christmas music on, that's what I would do. Yeah. It's when the Christmas music was playing, and I would try to figure out the solfege. I'm like, and it took me a while. At the beginning, I was like, oh, this sucks. This is horrible. I can't figure it out. Now I'm at a red light listening and trying to like pay attention to what's going on and while I'm driving. But then eventually, you know, it's like, oh, well, I heard the cadence, so there was sol to do, and then you kind of start to tag things along there. And it's a long process, but learning your training is a long process, and that's something that I tell my music theory and oral skills students too, is practice your ear training like you practice your instrument. Even my string students too, I'm like, practice ear training, because it's really helpful when you're trying to like tune all over here.
Yes.
It's definitely vital, but it is something that takes practice. Like every morning when I would take just 5 to 10 minutes and do intervals, do a dictation before I logged in the theory class. I don't know anybody else that was doing that, but it would help make less tears come out of my eyes during class.
Yes.
Like I'm unworthy, and ultimately now like that's stuck with me. I don't practice ear training as often anymore. I still do, but a lot of it's stuck with me, and now I'm capable of doing. Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the stuff that we covered for theory. I would say invest in a teacher box too. Just
the other things that I have sort of bouncing off of theory into music learning, because there's a lot of overlap with those applications. And I believe this is free, or it wasn't a subscription. If it cost money, it was a one-time purchase, and it was called Sheet Music Scanner. It's literally just like a blue box with like an eighth note in it. And you can take a picture of your sheet music and it will read it for you and turn it into a MIDI file. Is it always perfect, particularly if you're like dealing with a massive choral piece or an orchestral piece where there are so many lines of music? It does make little mistakes. Something I wish that you could do is I wish you could go in and correct individual things, because sometimes it's just like one accidental that it can't see or something. But it does a pretty good job, particularly for solo pieces. Or for reading one line at a time. So I might scan my choral music and it might not be able to read the accompaniment because that's, very dense, but I can click on the alto line and it can give me that, so I get it in my ear. That was very, very helpful, particularly before things like Accompanist or for pieces that were not on YouTube, because obviously you can find a lot of sort of MIDI files or somebody going over a practice track of your part. I found that choral stuff was the heaviest workload out of everything. It always took up the most of my time, which was fine because I loved chorus. I've always been a choir person. I know a lot of solo vocalists do not like it. They're like, I feel like I have to constantly turn off my vibrato and shrink myself. And I'm like, no, you don't. You just have to blend. Sorry, no shade there. But yeah, I found that choir took up the vast majority of my time. So and also for opera, we oftentimes did really obscure things that you just could not find online, or if you did, they were really, really low quality recordings. So that app saved my life in many situations and was very, very helpful in, sort of those last minute in a pinch when you're like, oh gosh, I think I'm going to get pulled out to sing this solo today. Because they would do that sometimes. They'd be like, do you guys know it? Okay, you and you get up here and do it by yourselves. So really having your own part solidly in your ear, particularly once I switched from being a soprano to finding out that I was a mezzo. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't singing the melody and everything and thinking that I had a solid ear, but it is a mental adjustment to not automatically go to the top pitch that you hear when you're singing. So that really helped me sort of become adept at picking out my part two by having a tool that could do it for me. People think that that will make you lazier. It doesn't. It actually makes you more proficient. So Music Scanner app was really good. Cyberbase is a huge online resource of MIDI files and practice tracks for choral compositions. It's not going to have everything, but your giant masses and requiems that kind of everybody learns at some point, it's going to be on there. If you don't find it on Cyberbase, look for it on YouTube. Look for ways to help yourself. If you have the option of having a tablet, back everything up onto a tablet. Take photos of all of your sheet music. I am not somebody who likes to use a tablet in lessons and in rehearsals. I know some people are kind of transitioning to just using their tablet. I feel like I take too many notes with pencil and it takes too long to do that on a tablet. At least if you have that option, you know that if you ever forget something, if you need an extra copy, and if you're traveling and you don't want to bring a stack of books or a big binder, you always have that backup. Because I don't know if you've ever forgotten your music in a rehearsal.
Oh yeah.
It's the worst feeling ever if you left one of your scores at home. Like the shaming of you could get fired for that, and everybody's it's gonna happen to you once.
There's a funny thing, and this is so side off this, but it makes me so mad when people are like, oh yeah, you're gonna learn professionalism in conservatory because you would get fired if you did this. You know how many gigs I've done where I've forgot something or whatever, nobody cares.
No one
or
cares.
I see somebody, but no one cares. They're all there to help.
Yeah, they act like if you ever walk to the front of the room without your pencil, that they're just gonna like put you in jail. And like realistically, no, it doesn't happen. Yeah, tablets are, I know they're expensive. I didn't have one for most of my degree either, but when I have an iPad now, when I was in the last couple of years, I bought an Amazon Fire tablet because they're very, very cheap. Honestly, I think their like basic model was like $60. It's not huge. It's like, you know, a medium size. It's like the size of a Kindle. But since all I really needed it for was to store my sheet music, and also I could open Google Docs and take notes on it, and it was way lighter to carry than a laptop. So I just used that and a Bluetooth keyboard most of the time instead of bringing my full-on laptop. I find that I don't know if this was your experience. Maybe it's different when you're an education major. I didn't really need my laptop for much of my classes. Even at home, most of what I did was by hand.
Oh yeah, I needed my laptop everywhere.
Yeah,
A
okay.
lot.
I definitely had people who did. I'm somebody who does believe that taking notes by hand can be very helpful. But yeah, there weren't a lot of classes where a laptop was required until I got to the point where I was buying most of my books as ebooks. You're not writing as many papers constantly as a performance major, at least, as you would if you were pretty much any other college major. So I just found that it was really, really helpful to have a Bluetooth keyboard. There were even some days when I didn't bring my tablet. I just had my phone and a Bluetooth keyboard, and I could connect the keyboard to my phone and open Google Docs and take notes that way. Your teachers are pretty much never going to let you like take notes like this in class. Maybe that's changed, but back then they were like, you might be texting, even though you could do that from a computer also. But I think it's a mental thing for a lot of them. But if I had my phone sitting on a keyboard and I was typing like this, they didn't care. I don't know what that shift was. Also, you can type faster. But I found that that was very easy on days when I did not want to lug around a lot of stuff.
One thing for music ed majors, if you know, you know, Victoria Bowler, incredible for lesson plans, curriculum designing, just basically like how to format your teaching plans, ideas. She has so many different resources when it comes to teaching. So especially if you're even like a performance major and you get an opportunity to teach and you're like, oh my God, like I've never taught before, but like I should take this opportunity. What do I do? I definitely recommend looking into that. I know she has quite a few free resources on her website. So look into some of the free stuff, and then if you want to subscribe, go for it because she has so much stuff. But it's a really great start for teaching. My last little tool I have in my list is our podcast. So, for surviving classical music as a whole, just everything, not even solely music school, but yeah, especially like our burnout episode or conservatory culture episode, those are great for specifically music at
for sure,
music
for
at
sure.
Conservatory. So if you haven't checked those out,
Yes.
check them out.
Did you ever hear about LiveScribe when you were in school?
No.
So there are smart pens, and I remember I lost it like halfway through my degree, but it was very helpful in theory. And also I imagine for history. History was easier for me, but if I was someone who struggled to remember more, it's these smart pens, and they come with notebooks. They're a little bit more expensive, but particularly if you're somebody with any kind of learning difference or disability, I think these are really helpful. And when you take notes, you can take them manually. It automatically, like, whatever you write, it like takes a picture of, like it can track your motions and puts your handwritten notes into an app. And then so you can literally see like in your own handwriting what you wrote, and it can read it and convert it into like a document. And it records. Now, most professors will let you record lectures, but just generally a good idea to ask. But you know, that's usually, there's not an expectation of privacy in a lecture, but it's just always to be safe. But it records what you're writing. So you can literally take your pen, and in the notebook, you can click, you're just pressing your pen onto that section, and it will access that recording on your phone, and it will play you what was being spoken when you wrote something down. So if you're writing in shorthand, and because you can't possibly write everything quickly enough, and you're like, what did that mean? What did this abbreviation that I tried to write mean? You can literally press on it with your pen, and your pen will play that exact section of the lecture. So you're not having to scroll through like an hour-long recording and trying to find the right section that you need. That was pivotal for getting me through Theory 1. You know, again, it's a little bit more of an investment, but it is something that I would say if you have any kind of auditory or visual processing disorders, dyslexia, any of those kinds of things, I would say that it's really worthwhile to invest in.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess this is kind of a tool or just something to do, but start therapy before you enter music school,
Yes,
or as soon as you figure it out during music school. Even if you don't have any sort of history of trauma or
you will.
you will. There you go. Yeah, exactly. But also, it's simply if you just need somebody to vent to. It's not always safe to vent to your friends that are in the classical music field
It's true.
because it's so toxic that people will talk about you to other people, even if you're talking about something like in privacy and like in closed safety. You truly cannot trust people. You can't trust things that you tell to professors either. I've had professors tell me very intimate details about other students that legally they were not supposed to tell me. So you can't really trust many people that you think you can go to this adult, you can go to your best friend. There's a risk there. So just know
And they're
that
not
there's that risk.
professionals. They're not trained.
Yeah. So even the simplest thing though that you think you can vent about, just be leery of that. I think it's very helpful to be in therapy, even simply just to be like, hey, this, because they'll ask you what your situation is. Just be like, I'm in music school. They'll know, and just say like, I really just need somebody to talk to in like privacy and safety. And I think that will really help you to have that outlet somewhere. Yeah. And then once you endure the trauma of music school in whatever shape or form that becomes, there's your therapist that
you've taken care of yourself. Yes, exactly. They lived it with you. And I know therapy is expensive. Our medical system in this country sucks. Look at what your school has in terms of options. Obviously, it's not ideal. You're working with therapists in training a lot of the time, but they may have some resources that are free or very cheap and accessible. So if you're in a pinch, oftentimes those things are first come, first serve. It's worth giving them, like checking them out and seeing. If not, they also are connected, like especially if you move to a new city for college, they oftentimes know who is in the area. So they might say, oh, this person works here and worked with a lot of our students. They may have recommendations for psychiatrists and people, therapists and all kinds of resources that maybe can be very intimidating to just Google in your area if you're living on your own for your first time. So there are just a couple of things that are kind of voice specific that I wanted to get into just real quick before we move on from tools. Respiratory muscle training devices. They're basically just like a little tube that provides resistance when you breathe. When I was recovering from mono, my lungs were really, really damaged from all the coughing and wheezing. And that was really pivotal in getting my strength back up. It sometimes is hard to just activate your muscles properly by just thinking about them. And so having something that kind of automatically, provides the kind of resistance that it takes to train your muscles is very important. Translations, a big part of your degree will be working with French, German, and Italian, Latin, Spanish, and Czech too, but generally French, German, and Italian. And at times you will have to look things up. When I was in school, all I knew about was Google Translate, but DeepL is a translation. It's a much more accurate online translation tool than Google and a lot of other ones. And what's great about it is it's helpful for learning because you can click on a specific word or a specific phrase within your sentence that you're trying to translate and see alternative versions of how that might be translated. You're always going to want to have your dictionaries and your books, the Holy Grails, German for singers. Always have dictionaries of everything in all of your languages. Interpretation of French song, you're going to use that a lot, and singer's Italian for your diction. You're going to need those. And then IPA sources. You're going to have to write out your International Phonetic Alphabet translations for everything. It's going to be a requirement. If they see you using music without it written out, you're dead. So having IPA sources a great, do the work on your own usually, but check. It's good for checking your work, or at least that's the disclaimer I have to give. It's good for checking your work. You're not going to know all the answers and nobody expects you to. So those are good resources to have that are a little bit more singer specific.
Kind of moving on to some other topics. Side job opportunities, I think, is hugely important to look into. one of the biggest mistakes I made is that I made music school my whole life, but more specifically, I made music my whole life. So those are two different issues kind of here. For one, making music school your whole life, it's kind of complicated because I was a double major, so I was pursuing 2 degrees at the same time, and it was a very intense degree plan. So it's not always that simple, and even for performance majors solely or music ed majors solely, or that your schedule is still very busy. So it's not always that simple to not make music school your whole life. But taking some side job opportunities I think is very helpful. There are also opportunities within your school. There's like a stage setup thing that you can do. So when people are giving recitals or whenever there's concerts, you can apply to do that. And it's kind of like a part-time thing. So you don't have to commit to a certain number of hours, I don't believe. But you can kind of assign yourself up for which ones you want to do. You could be a music librarian at your school. Cool thing about that is you can also not many people come in, so you can just sit there and do your homework while you're managing some other stuff. Sometimes there's not a ton of work to do, so you do get your own time too. Convenient. You can be a music theory tutor. Sometimes schools will offer that where you can do that as undergrad. I know sometimes you have to be a graduate assistant or a teaching assistant, so like a GA or a TA to assist with tutoring or helping students, but you can also do it on your own and have nothing to do with your school and just do music theory separately. That's a good go-to. I know for the location in Chicago where I'm at, there is a Symphony Center music store that's right down the street. And there was a time where they had openings up there for students. So look around the area of your school. They might have little an on-campus Starbucks, something like that to work into. So for the convenience, if you have this really busy schedule and you want to make sure that you're able to support yourself financially and have just a little part-time job, something on the side, I think that's something great to look into. Sometimes there are music schools around the area too that you can look into, see if you can substitute teach, and then maybe they'll take you on as a full-time teacher. So those are really great opportunities, everything I just listed that are music related, that will help you make money, help gain you experience. Also start your resume. I think it's very important to start building your resume while you're in music school. You don't want to wait till after school because you want to have some stuff built there and prepared. And all the things I just mentioned are wonderful credentials. Now, tying into not making music school your whole life, or specifically not making music your whole life, I think it's very easy to become overwhelmed, and worse is lose your passion if you're constantly doing music. You have to have time to miss the thing that you're passionate about or to want to do the thing you're passionate about, and you can never have that if you're constantly doing that thing. That's how you lose your passion. Doing stuff, as silly as it sounds, it is so vital, and I wish I did something like this earlier. Join a book club. Find a sport that you really want to do a Saturday morning yoga class that is somewhere you can drive or take public transit or walk to, somewhere nothing to do with your university, with your conservatory, have it be something completely separate. You don't want to just have your identity within music school. You want to have other places where you can exist, and specifically something not music related. Smart thing to do. Someone that I talked to that is currently a music educator, she's been teaching for a couple of years, and she told me the places that she's made the most friends in her place of work are not the music teachers, it's the other teachers, the mathematics teachers, the science teachers, the English teachers. So making friends somewhere else. Have non-music friends. It's good to have music friends because it's people that you can relate to, but I think it's vital to have non-music friends too. Some people that can remind you of what life is like outside of this one bubble. Is very important.
It's true. And I was actually going to say, in a perfect world, that's exactly the advice that I would give. Did I do any of that? No. Could I? I can't imagine how I would have. Now, I did have, it was funny, when I was first auditioning for college, I was like, I don't need to make friends. I don't need to be there to make friends. I already have friends. And I like my friends. Now, am I still friends with most of those people from high school? No. But my childhood friends, my 2 best friends are people that have been in my life since I was 8 and 11. So I did have those ride or die people, those people who are basically family. Yeah, they had some familiarity with music. One, her mother was a music major and I knew her from choir, but she is a stay-at-home mom now. And my other one was in medical school and the military. And so very different world, more overlap than you would think though, in terms of pressures. So I definitely did have, my couple of core people, but generally I would love to say, have a hobby that has nothing to do with music, get a side job, do something else. Now I was dealing with chronic illness, but that's also not uncommon. And I had no social life. If I was not working at school, I was probably sleeping or at the doctor. And the only reason that I had any kind of social life was because I happened to fall in love with a person who was right there. You know, I started dating Joe at the end of my freshman year of college. So, like, my relationship was built in because we weren't going on dates. It was let's run to Panera between classes. And it was very, very, I think a lot of things moved quickly because I didn't have to explain what I did to him. You know, I didn't have to go like, oh yeah, I'm an opera singer. Here's what opera is. Here's what people think opera is that it isn't. Here's what my schedule looks like. I didn't have to do all of that. I could go home and I could say, oh my God, you won't believe what this professor did today. And he knew the professor and he knew the class, and I didn't have to explain everything. And I didn't have to listen to people misunderstand what I was passionate about. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I would never date another musician. I worry about where I would be now if I didn't have, because otherwise I would not have seen people, you know, that I had that person to be there with. The first time that I had time for hobbies that existed outside of music was really when the pandemic came. And that's when I realized how healthy it was. When the pandemic hit, I started building a dollhouse from scratch as my quarantine project. So I would have my lectures on Zoom, and then I would just be sitting there carving out windows and, you know, and staining the floors, and that became it was a very therapeutic project, and that became something that is like a huge hobby of mine now. And I'm not sure how I would have fit it in, but I really wish I had discovered some of that, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into like inner child healing, wish fulfillment, being the kind of adult that you needed when you were a kid, that go into the other hobbies. Sewing my own clothes, that's another thing. I don't know where I would have had the time. My secondary interest when I was in school was makeup, was stage makeup. So I do think, like, if you don't have time, find something that is adjacent but different within your own program. Like, people always need help with the hair and makeup and the costume design. And that was something that I could do, that I was passionate about, that was just removed enough, but that didn't involve me doing something with time other than when I was at school. So do what Emily says if you can, but if you can't, wait until you can.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I had gotten that advice quite a bit. I just did not take it. And I got it from like teachers, like my junior high orchestra director, my high school orchestra director, like my high school violin teachers, like they were the ones that would tell me, and I was like, no, my whole life's going to be music. You're not going to tell me to. I was so stubborn. I still am. But I was so stubborn. I'm like, I'm going to do it anyway. And I mean, you can't take the advice that everybody gives you because it's not always the best. But I think about every piece of advice if it's coming from somebody that really cares about you and is experienced in your field. And just give it some consideration and really think about it, because that definitely would have helped.
And do your best. You know, you won't be able to do everything. So pick what it resonates with you the most. Okay, well, you're somebody who's had an overuse injury. I have somebody who's had voice surgery. So are there specific tools or techniques, tricks, doctors that you recommend for keeping your health as a musician, whether it has to do with specifically the body parts that you use in playing, or it has to do with just your general health overall? That was something I was going to ask.
The doctor I would recommend forever and ever, and I think he's getting close to retirement, so take it now, is Dr. Jerry Chow. He actually came to my senior recital. He left me a very sweet message. He's very kind, but he is incredible at what he does. He has done 2 surgeries on me. The first one was not overuse, but it was chopping off my pinky, carving a pumpkin. And he attached in well. I can still play my bow. So incredible with that, but also with the overuse injury. It's so complicated with the injury that I had, is because it's commonly misdiagnosed as tendinitis, and I had other doctors misdiagnose. So it's so important to get second opinions if you feel like you can't trust your doctor, because a lot of people kept saying that, and he was like, no, it's radial tunnel syndrome, which is a little more odd, but he caught it right away, and thank God he did, and he went in and did that surgery, because I could have gotten an incorrect surgery and then I would have still had this issue. So yeah, it's very important. And I know that a lot of people are scared of surgery, but I do have to say that I am definitely pro-surgery. Ultimately, I would not have healed. I would not be here right now. I would not have put on my senior recital 2 weeks ago if I did not get surgery. So many people told me, don't get surgery. Heal naturally. don't let anyone do anything into your body that
Okay.
could change you forever, and maybe something will happen, you'll never be able to play your instrument again. And that just scared me more because I didn't have a choice. I did have to have surgery ultimately.
Yeah.
And that was what I needed. And I think that it's something that you should consider as a musician. Because there are doctors that primarily handle musicians. He didn't. He knew. I think the thing is, if you have a doctor that doesn't primarily work with musicians, they're going to tell you just to stop playing altogether. You can negotiate that. Don't be afraid of that, because I was very afraid. That's exactly what he said. You can negotiate it. Be like, this is my career. I'm in music school right now. This is what I'm doing. I can't stop playing completely. Here's what I can do. Sometimes they'll have you keep playing a little bit. They'll put you in physical therapy. They'll try things before they go the surgical route. But I don't think it's something to be afraid of. I would 100% recommend when they say you need the surgery, do the surgery. Because otherwise you're just going to be living miserable with pain for the rest of your life. And it's, of course there's risks to surgery, but I think it's worth the risks if you ever want to be comfortable doing your career again and capable of doing it.
You might be better than you started out. I mean, I've had 2 voice surgeries and I had the same thing. Everyone was like, oh my God, don't get surgeries. They put tubes down your throat. You'll have scarring. And, you know, the first one I got in high school, it was an adenoidectomy. I was constantly getting sore throats and irritation. They removed it. It improved things astronomically. Then in college, I was sick every 2 weeks because my sinuses were so tiny that germs could get in, but they couldn't get out. So I was getting the same sinus infection. It would go away with the antibiotics, but then all the germs would still be there and it would just get reignited. And then I had mono on top of that. And I had a Dr. Stephen Charas, he's an ENT in the Illinois, greater Chicago area, kind of far away, who scoped it and was like, you've got a deviated septum, your sinuses are the size of pinholes, you need surgery. And so I went back to Texas and I had the same guy who did my adenoidectomy do the rhinoplasty and sinuplasty. And he works with a lot of the Dallas Opera Company. A lot of people I know write singer on their head or musician on their body when they go into surgery, because they want you to know, don't mess anything up, do not take risks. And I think because I'd already had the surgery, one surgery with him as a minor when I didn't know as much as I knew, that I was kind of like, oh, no big deal. I kind of like having surgery. The rhinoplasty was the best decision I ever made. First of all, I had no idea how little I could breathe before. And then I was like, oh, is this the airflow? Is this how breathing should feel? Oh my God. My sound doubled, my resonance tripled. I didn't have so much pressure in my head when I was singing. The most important thing, I wasn't getting sick every 2 weeks. And imagine if I had been so scared and I had never done that. Yes, there's risk with everything, but there's also risk with not getting treatment. And so do your research, find doctors and surgeons that you trust that won't gaslight you, get second opinions when you can. That's always important. But I am so grateful. I'm team surgery. I'm so grateful I did it because I don't think I would have survived my degree otherwise.
Yeah, and there are some things early on too, or even preventative measures that you could take specifically for instrumentalists. I mean, warming up properly for everybody, I think is important.
True.
Don't just wake up at 7:50 a.m. and you have your class at 8 a.m. and go practice your Shostakovich violin concerto. Do your warm-ups, do your open strings first, do your scales, do your etudes, do your double stops, do that stuff. You don't have to practice double stops for an hour. I know violin teachers are like, do this for an hour, No, do a little warm up with each thing and then you can get to your repertoire, but don't just jump right into stuff that can hurt you in the long run. Soaking your arms in hot water before you play, and then once you're done, putting them in colder water after you play. There's stretches too. For me, stretches never seem to really work. And I know that there's a lot of research on stretches sometimes not being so much of a good thing, so it depends on the person.
If you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, it doesn't work. That's another thing I wish I had known. A lot of the exercises I learned would never work for me for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. If you're a healthy person, great book of exercises for singers. If you have hypermobility, maybe take it with a grain of salt. But that's something a lot of musicians have, some form of hypermobility and don't know it, whether they're vocalists or not. If you feel like something is weird or you feel like something isn't working from you, remember that your teachers aren't doctors. I had a piano teacher as a child who just kept telling me that I needed to stretch my hands out more because I couldn't play an octave. Every week she'd just be like, you need to stretch your hands out. And now they're like, your tension is your only form of stability. If you didn't have that tension, your bones would fall out of their places.
I want to go into something with dealing with professors. I think that that's very important. If your school offers end of the semester reviews, please do them. I've learned a lot over the past couple of years about reviewing and how important it is to leave reviews. You can leave positive and negative things in a review. please do that. Now, I know, like, for where I went to school, there was some safety concerns, and the professors could easily figure out who it was that made the review.
Legally, they're not allowed to retaliate or to even guess who does it, but they do.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so there is that risk. So you need to do whatever you can to hide your identity. Like, specifically write something in, like, different language that you wouldn't usually use. Like, make it sound whatever.
Click on the thesaurus, you know?
Yeah, literally.
Use different words.
But it's very important. There has to be some sort of paper trail in case this professor is doing something wrong, or if they're doing something really well. Make sure that there's this on file of saying, oh, look at all these wonderful things that they've been doing over these years, or these things that are bad. It's so helpful, and it helps students down the line, too, that you want to keep safe and help them have a good education for everybody. I have to say this, especially in music school, people are terrified to do this, but please report professors if they do inappropriate comments. Please do. I can't tell you how many people I know that have not reported inappropriate comments, and it has progressed into something further.
Or they don't know what is inappropriate.
Yeah, if it's making you uncomfortable, if it's something weird, you need to say, I want to make a report about this to have it on file. Have it down there.
If it feels wrong, it is wrong.
Exactly. It's very, very important for, in case it does progress into other things for other students. And if they're saying it to you or doing it to you, they're probably saying or doing it to somebody else. And it's a huge element of safety. And I know in the music community, you're like, I just want to put on my horse blinders and turn somewhere else because I don't want to ruin my name as the whistleblower if I say, oh, this professor said this or they did this. You don't have to tell a bunch of people. Just put it on file because it would be so helpful. It's a huge thing, and it's something that I've learned that's like made me upset is that there are so many stories people have with particular professors that they never reported because they were scared for themselves that they would get in trouble for reporting it. Yeah. I promise you won't. There will be people that back you up if anything was done to retaliate against you, but it's so important for people's safety, so please do that. I also, this is going to sound pretty intense, but it's very true. Do not let the professors close the door when you are in their office with them. Just don't. There's no reason to. Now, I mean, the only time there could be a reason to is if you have like a singing exam. Don't let it be closed all the way. Have there be a slight crack. There's no reason that they should say no to that. The door, you should always be comfortable. Let the door stay open. You can never, ever trust. I'm going to say male professors in particular, but it sometimes happens with female professors too. It can happen anywhere. In music school, we always cry. If you're crying, if you're talking to your like teacher about something like, oh my God, like I'm not doing this right, I'm not practicing this right, and they want to close the door for your privacy, I still recommend it doesn't happen because that's where the things progress. Stuff that seems like, well, it's not that bad. That's where they start to think, oh, I can do this. And the more, just don't let them close the door.
And if there are situations like, again, recording is tricky with legality, but it also is kind of expected that as a music student that you're recording lessons and things like that. So just state like, hey, can I record this? If they say no, then you know that's somebody you need to be careful around. But oftentimes that way, you know, there's so much of like, hey, like that's not suspicious to be like, can I record this so I can listen back and practice? That's not a weird thing to say, or like so that I don't have to take notes on everything. And then if they slip up and forget something, then you have their consent recorded too. That's just always, I mean, get consent and make sure the consent part is recorded. But that's something that is helpful to have, particularly if your like offices and classrooms do not have windows in the doors. And absolutely, if you see a lock turn, get out of there. Do not be afraid to make a scene. You know, if they're a good person, they'll understand. If they had bad intentions, that's the kind of person who gets defensive. In college, you're going to get sick a lot. You're in a petri dish if you're in the dorms, and you're stressed. You're probably not eating as healthy as you did at home. So while this is particularly helpful for singers, I think it's good for everybody, is neti pots or sinus rinses. There's a lot of different shapes. Sometimes they look like teapots. Sometimes they're just a squeezy bottle. It literally gets all the gunk out of your sinuses, which is obviously great if you're a singer, but anyone else, that helps get germs and bacteria out of there. So that's always a good idea to have. Steamers, personal steamers, you can get them at CVS, that like help you, you know, again, keep everything there hydrated. I feel like everybody gets migraines or headaches at music school. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of stuff going on. If you're somebody who deals with really intense migraines, first of all, always have some kind of pain medication in your bag with you. You know, that can ruin your day. But this device, separately, it's a little bit more expensive, but it's basically like a tiny TENS unit. You have an electrode and this is magnetic, and you just stick them together, you put it on your forehead, and it activates those muscles to help you relieve tension. It's tiny, it's small, it's a good thing to have if you're somebody. And again, neck tension, shoulder tension, that tends to be the way a lot of us store our tension, and I think that affects you no matter what your instrument is. But as a singer, I have so many tools, like so many like boards that you use for. I'm not supposed to use this stuff anymore now that I know I have Ehlers-Danlos, but if you don't, anything that helps with releasing tension in the neck and shoulders. This one is a squeezy device. You put your neck in here and it squeezes and it heats, and it starts to help relieve the tension there, which I find is very, very helpful. So all kinds of like tools are just really good for stress because you're going to have it. I found that a smartwatch, even like a cheap smartwatch, is good. Being able to track your vitals, your heart rate, your oxygen, your blood pressure, is very helpful to have, particularly if you are having health problems while you're at college. You have a record. If you're a singer, having some kind of torso compression, Spanx, some people like corsets, having a little bit of resistance to breathe into can really help you develop your intercostal muscles and your abdomen. Get enough protein. When you don't have enough protein, you are very easy to manipulate and take advantage of. It like you get a cognitive decline when you do not have enough protein. I know that it's so hard, food is expensive, but cram it in wherever you can, because you will absolutely need to make sure that your wits are about you. Like, don't put yourself at a disadvantage. It's not your fault if something happens to you, but if there is something you can do preventatively, that's always good. And then something I recommend to all women, but honestly all people, is if you can take self-defense classes before you start college, it's a good idea. It helps you learn that you can be small, you can be non-muscular, and you can still protect yourself.
This is something that I got somewhere online on Amazon, I think, but it's a dorm doc college medical kit. And I'm still obsessed with it. I think I'll have it for the rest of my life. Healthy students succeed. That goes with what Claire was talking about. But no, it's really cool. Like, it opens up and there's just like all these different like pockets. There's stuff for everything everywhere. The thing is, it comes with medication itself. That is the cool thing. So it already comes with stuff. If it's stuff that you might not use or you don't like certain kinds of medication, that's different. But it comes with like Band-Aids, like wipes, gloves, like a little pair of scissors, thermometer. Yeah, I think this is really helpful, especially if you're living in a dorm. Like, it just has like all your medication and stuff that you need like right there.
Yes.
Yeah, I highly recommend.
Have a survival kit like that, whether it's medical or something else, for your days on campus. You will learn to forget your dignity. You will learn to curl up and nap in hallways, in alcoves. Like, you will learn to cry in front of people that you never thought you'd cry in front of. I dealt with chronic fatigue. So something that I always did is I always had a long sweater that worked as a blanket, and I always had a jacket that was cushy that worked as a pillow. I always had over-the-ear headphones because that sensation of having something cover here helped me block things out better. I was like a cat. If there was like a little corner somewhere, oh, there's Claire. She's with her headphones on, like curled up, like sweater over my head, like, don't talk to me. I'm an introvert. I need to have quiet, alone time to decompress. And sometimes you really can't get that. So you kind of have to create your own little bubble. You're going to cry. I think that particularly if you're somebody who wears makeup, it's good to have makeup wipes.
It's helpful for me being in the COVID like mask era, because
masks.
I would go to class, my mask would be covering this much, and mascara would be, you could see it, but it was mostly covered, so no one knew.
Yes. I exclusively had waterproof mascara or false eyelashes instead of mascara when I was in school. I always have a hairbrush, I always have deodorant, I always have hairpins and hair ties. Those are just, I think it's just kind of like smart things to have with you, but you'll figure out like what is your survival kit, because you have very long days on campus. Maybe it's medication, maybe it's snacks.
And I feel like we've already said a lot of stuff already, but with everything that we've said, remember that you're always constantly learning. So it's not like you're going to take every single piece of advice and be like, okay, now I'm safe to go to music school. Like, not everything is going to work specifically for you. There are going to be things that you also find along the way. Like, little me entering college, I was just so excited and happy. And I was like, okay, what can I do? What's everything that I need to know and to do and be prepared? And you can't be fully prepared. So I think that's something that don't stress over too much. You're going to be constantly learning and evolving, especially college years. That's the years as you're entering the adult world. So
Did you always know that you wanted to be a double major?
Yeah. I guess since I wanted to major in music, that's what I wanted. I was just aware that not many programs offered it, so I wasn't
Mhm.
sure if I would get the opportunity to do both. But
Yes. Yeah, that's something I was going to ask because I remember that I always knew I wanted to be a performance major. I knew that being a teacher was not my goal. And always go with your gut because everywhere I went, people tried to convince me to be a double major or to do education instead. Everywhere. People either said to double major in something that wasn't music related. They were like, oh, you should also major in business, or like you should double major, or you should double major in education, or education is a more stable career in music and you should do that. And I think about the fact that, like, if I had done that, yes, maybe there'd be more tangible ways of generating income, but I wouldn't have survived the degree, so it wouldn't have mattered. So I felt like during my process of like looking at colleges, people were constantly trying to tell me that what I wanted to do was not good enough. The only person who has to live with you forever is you, and you have to live with your decisions. So trust your gut on that. I'm really glad that I did not let myself get talked into a major that I did not want or get talked into extra work. I needed a couple of extracurriculars, and my family was mad that I took like women's and gender studies and psychology instead of, again, business. And I found those classes to be some of the most helpful and enlightening and healing spaces for me. I think the benefits I got out of them were far greater than I would have gotten out of learning more about how to do an Excel spreadsheet. So you got to listen to your own gut.
yeah, I know that's a huge pressure on performance majors is like also major in music education, which can be very helpful, but you can't force teaching on somebody that doesn't want to
No,
teach. Teaching is something
no.
that you do have to be passionate and interested about to do it, and especially to do it well. There was somebody I had heard of that taught at an elementary school, and he was always miserable. He never wanted to teach. He didn't like working with young kids, and he was a performance major, and he had like a wonderful career plan for him, and all of a sudden he had an injury that was irreversible and could not go back. I don't think it was overuse. I think it was something that happened to him, and so he's teaching now to make income, but he hates it, like wholeheartedly hates it. So there's a lot to learn from that story, but I think in relation to what we were just talking about, it's a reminder that music education that can't be forced on you. It has to be something that you're interested in. Or
Something I would say that's very important is it's not always about how you practice or where you practice or how much time you spend. It's about being seen doing certain things. Something I always did was before choir, I would finish my lunch, I'd have my break in the middle of the day, and then I would head up anywhere from like 30 to 15 minutes early. And and there was nobody there yet, and I would set up in the hallway on a bench with my headphones on, with my score open and my pencil in my hand, and I would listen to my practice tracks. Because every day that our choir director walked past and she would see me sitting there circling things and going over stuff and counting to myself, she would, like, oftentimes I would be like so engrossed I wouldn't see her, and she would get in my face and be like, and then she'd go, good job. And that makes her trust me more. So when I was having chronic illness episodes, even if she doesn't necessarily know if I haven't cracked open my books all weekend, but if I did that, one, I got more solos. And she learned to know, like, I'm somebody who will always be reliable for concerts. Like, when it comes down to it, I might have to work harder, but I will never let you down in the actual performance. Being seen with that made it much easier if I said, hey, I have the flu and I'm not going to be at rehearsals this week. Because she knew that I would put in the extra effort to make up for my own deficiencies. And, you can tell your teachers how much you practice, but nothing takes the place of being spotted doing stuff. I also made sure that I was spotted helping other people. I never wanted to be a section leader. I didn't feel like my piano skills were strong enough. I did get selected a couple times, and then I was like, can we not? Can I give this to someone else? But I always made sure that, like, okay, we know we're going to be tested on this section of the music today, so let me get there early. And if I see other people struggling, I'll be like, hey, I have a MIDI file. Do you want me to share it with you? And we would be seen in the corner of the room counting something out or going over something together. I never offer unsolicited advice. I've had people reach over and circle things in my music for me. There is nothing that has made me want to punch a human more in my life than that. Never correct people. If you're sitting next to somebody and they sing something or play something different than what you thought was correct, assume you're the one making the mistake, because you can always go home and figure it out. And I always would turn to the person next to me, even if she was much younger than me, even if I was 99.9% sure that they made the mistake. I'd be like, hey, I just sang something different. Did I make a mistake? and then we'd figure it out. Like, approach everything with humility, but be seen being helpful and not being arrogant. And don't help people who don't want your help. That's rude.
Yeah, I did an Instagram video, like a silly one about that, like when you're in the practice rooms and your teacher walks by. I forgot what music I put to it, but I had that happen once, and it was when I was a sophomore, but that was kind of like a freshman year because it was my first year in person after the pandemic, and I was in the practice rooms, and we have like these like windows on the practice room doors, and my teacher walked by and she waved, and I was like, oh my god, she just saw me practicing my etude, and she would bring that up to me and stuff, just like seeing that I am practicing. You'll have to put on a recital. Obviously, you might have to do a junior recital and a senior recital, or I think some just have you only do a senior recital. It depends on where you go. So you will have to put on a recital, and it's a big deal. It's something that you're always thinking about. It's not just about practicing, and that's something that like nobody knows. There's so much other stuff that you have to think about, and that's what I want to talk about. Promote your recital as best as you can. Sometimes schools will let you like hang up little flyers, like create your own flyer for one, have a good picture of yourself, write down like works by whatever you'll be doing, the date, have everything like nice, pretty organized, like color, use Canva for that. Something like that, print it out, put flyers over your school. I think you have to check with somebody before you do that though, so make sure about that. Promote it on social media. We have that, you can do it for free. So put it on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere. Getting that out there and so people can share it as well, and just getting it to people that maybe you haven't talked to in a while. I know for my senior recital, my 4th grade teacher came, my chemistry teacher came. You know, it's people that just like haven't seen me in a while and that really appreciate me and appreciate music. So you'll get a wider audience in that way too. And then big thing that I think everybody forgets about, because I know I've forgotten about it before too, send personal individualized invitations to people. So send them the flyer, but be like, hey, and ask how they're doing and get up to date with like what they're doing and everything, and be like, this is coming up, I would love for you to be there, and like write them out. Don't just copy and paste that specific thing to particular people. No, talk to the people. We forget like how to communicate with people, I think, being musicians and in the practice room all the time. It's the personal invitations. Those are the people then that want to come. It's not like you just
I felt so shy doing that. Like, I think I told you I had one friend who did that for everyone, every professor, every TA, every student. And he's the only person I've seen who must have had like 100 people in the audience for his recital. Because it does also, this sounds like you're being mean, you're not, but it kind of pressures people to come more. Like if you get that personal message versus just like, hey, this is the date, show up if you want to. And I felt so, I mean, I only had a junior recital because COVID. But I felt so awkward. I felt like if I personally invited people that they would feel pressured. And I really wish I had done more to be like, you know what, it's the worst that can happen is they can say no, and that's okay. But I felt like I was bugging people. So I think for a lot of people, for some of us, it's forgetting communication. For some of us, it's being shy to promote yourself. But no one else is going to do it for you in your job. So you have to get comfortable with it at some point.
Yeah. And schedule a dress rehearsal. I didn't get a dress rehearsal for my junior recital, which really sucked. You want to know your concert space really well. Even if you played in the space before with an orchestra, it's different when you're playing by yourself or with piano or in a quartet or a quintet. Dress rehearsals, wear your dress, your makeup, your hair, your shoes, everything the way that it is going to be for the actual recital. There is somebody that when I posted on Instagram for my dress rehearsal and I was in all my stuff that reached out to me and they're like, oh, I love that you did everything, like you were dressed as you were going to play. Like, I did that for my dress rehearsal at my conservatory, and there was a professor that made fun of me for it. And I was like, and of course it was a male professor. And I'm like,
they don't know.
What? I'm like, you have to get used to playing and what you're going to play. And what if, especially with my dress playing cello, what if my dress would have ripped? What if something wasn't? I had to know. I had to learn. And I had to know what it felt like to play with my hair exactly like that, with my earrings, with everything. And my earring, when I was trying it on for the dress rehearsal, it snapped. It broke. So, and it was defective already. So it's like, I figured that out in advance so it didn't happen during my recital day. Do that. People are so stupid when they say like, oh, you're just dressing and you're dressed for attention. That nobody cares.
Oh my God.
That is not why they're doing it. No, it's for your own comfort. Like, people just have nothing better to do. Please wear what you need to wear. Do what you need to do for you. Ignore the stupid people, as one of my music ed advisors told me. Ignore the stupid people.
And and if somebody does not exist in a body or wearing clothes that are similar to you, they don't know your experience. Like, the first time I performed in a gown, usually our showcases are relatively semi-formal, but we had one that was like really done up, and I bought a black ball gown and it was form-fitting on the hips, and I had practiced in it. I did a dress rehearsal in it. The thing I didn't do during the dress rehearsal is I didn't sit. And the way that our showcase works is while people are performing in the middle of the stage, everyone else is sitting in like a semicircle at the back of the stage. You don't leave the stage. And I hadn't practiced it that way. And while the skirt fit me just fine when I was standing, when I sat, I could see the seams just like going, like pulling apart. And if I had done that beforehand, I would have known, okay, that's not going to work. Shoes is a big thing. If you're wearing heels and your balance, your pelvic tilt, all of that affects you no matter what your instrument is.
Another thing is, I think since you have a little more control over your own recital with what music that you're playing and how you're performing it, come up with particular interpretations and dedications to your music that mean a lot to you and that mean something. Every single piece on my senior recital meant something versus my junior recital, I didn't have that. And it just made it so much easier to go out there and perform when there was so much more of a deeper meaning. It was not about checking off the boxes, about showing off my technique and doing things right. It was about performing and sending a message to the audience that way. And it had that impact. So that's very important. And it's something that, I mean, ultimately, it does follow you around in the music world. Even when you're in an orchestra and maybe you don't have so much control over their interpretations, there are other instances in music where you will. And when you're practicing, especially like solo works, if you're hired for something in particular, like that's what music's about. So
yes,
don't forget about that part.
I picked out all my stuff for my recital and I really liked Strauss. I'm kind of a lyrics person, which not a problem you have, but I was looking at the poetry of everything and then seeing if the music moved me. And one of the pieces I picked for my like Strauss section was called Zwijack. And it's basically a piece about like expressing gratitude to the people who love you. Like whether it's like a lover or it sounds very grand, it's very Victorian, it's very that romantic era of music. But when you're a student, you don't necessarily know what's overdone yet. You know, you don't hear things as many, like you haven't been hearing the same repertoire for 30 years the way some of your professors have. And when I told my teacher, he just went, oh, okay, you're gonna do that. He's like, oh, I hate that piece. Everyone does that piece. But I had really loved it. The first time I heard it and I read the text, I was like, this feels like my thank you to everybody that I love, thanking, Joe and my friends and my family and the people who helped me be here. And it was something that was really important to me. And I know a lot of people were like, oh my God, I hate this song. And a lot of them afterwards were like, oh, I actually really like the way you did it because I felt emotionally connected to it. Don't let someone else ruin something for you. There's always going to be canonical pieces that everyone has heard a million times. Flight of the Bumblebee. Did you get anyone reacting that way to doing that, or were people excited?
No, I got all positive comments about that. The only
That's
negative
great.
comment I got about my repertoire was the fact that I didn't have a concerto. Somebody, just some random Instagram hater, commented and was like, when they saw my repertoire, and they're like, what happened to the Tchaikovsky violin concerto? And I was like, okay, here we go. Because you know where it's coming from. It's not just a genuine, like, what about the Tchaikovsky? No. Yeah, I think there's this expectation to have, like, particular classical works, have the Tchaikovsky concerto, the Paganini Caprice 24, have Bach sonata and that stuff. And while that's important to have, I did that for my junior recital, and I wanted to make my senior recital more fun. And I wanted to be able to gauge the audience. And I can tell you that not only me, but everybody else loved my senior recital way more.
Yes.
You need technical abilities and musical abilities to be able to play the fun pieces just like you do the other pieces. So it's hard to do both. You want to make sure that you can do both. So it is very important to do something like Flight of the Bumblebee, or something like Mediterranean by Bach, which not a lot of people probably know. More like lesser known stuff. I definitely recommend that for violinists. There's a Heifetz Arrangements book. Get that book and just look at all the different stuff in there, because there's not many recordings on it. That's where you have your leeway, because it's not like, well, we've decided as a society we're doing it this way. You have some choice, which is cool.
I picked out a lot of obscure stuff, but then when I picked out stuff that everybody knows, like, don't let somebody ruin it for you. You like what you like. Developing your own taste as a musician is so important. That's where you get your passion.
And last recital thing, because I didn't have many things go wrong on my recital day, surprisingly, but the only issue was I forgot to get my strings changed in my bow rehaired in advance. And I realized it 2 weeks before. I hadn't taken my violin to a shop in almost a full year. That was a problem. And after I had made it through my recital, my violin was like, I can exaggerate and say it was in pieces, but it quite literally sounded like it was in pieces. It was so bad, and now that's what I am doing. I'm having, on my cello too, because I played violin and cello, both of them are being repaired, rehaired, new strings. The Flight of the Bumblebee in the pizzicato section, the screw at the end of my bow had nicked my violin several times by mistake. So now fixing those little nicks in there too. So please don't forget, write it in your calendar. As soon as you get your recital date, write that in your calendar. Have an appointment scheduled for 6 weeks before, because then you want the time to break in the strings and to be comfortable with it. So no later than that, though.
Sense.
Yeah. Getting towards the end of the episode, I have 2 little pieces of advice to throw at you going forward. I think it's really important to learn a secondary instrument, not piano. Something else except piano. Try something different. I think you can learn a lot from learning another instrument, and especially being at those early stages of playing one. Pick anything. You can pick any instrument. Sometimes your school might even have instruments that you can borrow for that, or you can just get like a really cheap one somewhere else. But it will teach you more things about how to practice and about music making, music learning. But it also reminds you of where that initial passion and love for music comes from. And sometimes when you're in music school, you can't get that on your instrument all the time, and you'll feel like you're starting to lose that. And there were some times where I was playing violin and I had all these issues related to violin at school that were directly impacting my violin playing, and I'd go pick up my cello and I could play cello just fine and enjoy learning and practicing and making music. So I think that's something that can help sustain your love for music. Highly recommend it. And 2, don't take anyone's opinions seriously, not even your teachers. I've been told by teachers to quit, and I did not take them seriously. You can't trust the opinions of teachers, of students, of people in the community, not in the community, anybody else. You take opinions with a grain of salt. That's all they are, is opinions and advice. Ultimately, it's up to you to make the decision on what's best for you. And everybody does have that gut intuition. You just have to find it.
Yes,
that's what
for
matters.
Sure. A sense of humor is your best friend in those situations. Just realizing, like, that might not be about me. That says more about them than me. I know what I'm doing. I was put on this earth with this passion for a reason. I was thinking so much about how much of our podcast episodes may sound like we're trying to discourage people. And I realized that had I been younger and watching this, like had I been an audience member who was, just starting conservatory or was in high school getting ready to go to it or auditioning, none of this would have changed my mind. Like I wanted it too much. I would have been way too stubborn. I would have been like there's a lot of stuff that would have been good to know, but I don't think there was anything you could have told me that would have made me go, oh, this is too dangerous. I wouldn't do it. Our purpose here is to equip you to protect yourself. I really feel like if you're already somebody who is interested in classical music, you already know, yeah, there's no money in it. Yeah, it's really hard. The hours are exhausting. The practice is exhausting. Like you're not doing it because you think it's going to be fun and easy. You're doing it because you have something inside you that you need to give the world. And that's very admirable. And I believe in everyone who tries to do it. I think it's so admirable. If you try, if you survive, if you attempt, there's no shame in struggling. There's no shame in dropping out. There's no shame in sticking with it and not feeling like you did every extra thing ever. Like, you're brave if you want to do this. Your passion means something. Your instincts mean something. You're the only person whose opinion ultimately matters.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. I think this was a very helpful episode for everybody out there. If you have any feedback, you can reach us at dissonantdialogues@gmail.com, or you can leave us a voicemail at 872-216-9032 with feedback. And if you'd like to be a guest, if you have guest ideas, topic ideas, questions, you can contact us through any of our platforms as well. We will have Instagram, and we also have TikTok that are also under our name, Dissonant Dialogues. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
On a different note, like, don't be friends with Claire. Claire's awful.
I am. I'm a mess.
Yeah, no, Claire and I's friendship is not good. It's
I
good
have
to
a
be
knife
friends
pointed
with
at her
him.
to do this
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
time. She's a hostage, actually. I like going under anesthesia. It's the only time I feel like I get genuine rest. Oh.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, my skin is gonna go like.
What's the word I'm looking for? You always figure out my. Emily, why didn't you get this changed before your recital? And I'm like, oh, okay, because I wanted to make my life harder for myself.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I think we
Obviously,
know. I forgot.
I did it to piss you off specifically.